"You're not joining the board meeting," the subject line said. I stared at my screen, blinking, not because I was surprised, but because of the gall. The damn email came at 6:42 p.m. on a Thursday. I was eating reheated chicken tikka off a paper towel and trying to remember if my laundry in the dryer was clean or just permanently wrinkled now. Gavin, my CEO, my boss, my favorite backstabber in a navy blazer, had written it like he was doing me a favor. "Carolyn, after consulting with the leadership team, we've decided to streamline tomorrow's board presentation. Investors are leaning toward a more concise image. Too many voices may dilute the message. Concise image, too many voices. Translation, you're too smart, too blunt, and you're the only one who might call me out in front of people who write 8-figure checks." That's when I knew this wasn't about image. This was about fear. I reread the email once, twice, 3 times. Then I calmly clicked reply and typed 6 words. "So you choose image over impact? Send." That was it. No yelling, no sarcasm. Just a paper cut across the ego. I sat back and stared at my home office wall, the paint chipping by the vent, the framed poster of a long-defunct logistics expo, and the corner where my cat used to knock over my whiteboard. I'd spent the last 6 months stitching together a 112-page internal report on market instability, regulatory shifts, and the shady acquisition Gavin was pushing like it was gospel. I didn't do it to win points, I did it because someone had to. And now I wasn't allowed in the room. Funny thing is, when people try to erase women like me, mid-40s, strategic, too experienced to manipulate, always forget one thing: we don't throw tantrums. We build bombs with facts and light fuses with smiles. By the way, if you're already picturing Gavin's smug face and rooting for him to fall flat on it, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and drop a like. 90% of folks listening don't subscribe, and it helps our little team keep turning corporate chaos into catharsis. Backstabbing doesn't sleep, and neither do we. Anyway, I reopened the report. It was titled Contingency Alpha Market Conditions and Risk Disclosures. I hadn't written it for tomorrow's meeting, at least, not originally. It started as a late-night insurance policy, built when Gavin first started sniffing around the boardroom with promises and projections that smelled like dollar store cologne, loud, cheap, and masking something rotten. Gavin was touting a soon-to-be-announced acquisition of a last-mile freight startup, the same one that had been under regulatory review for antitrust concerns. He cherry-picked market data like he was making a fruit salad, slapping numbers on slides that were technically true but ethically disgusting. None of the board caught it because none of them had the patience to read past bullet points and bar charts. But I did. I always did. So when I saw that email, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even call my husband to vent. I just clicked print and sent the report, anonymously, to Lana Brooks. Lana was 28, maybe 29, and a junior associate at Kramer Ventures, one of our biggest VC partners. Sharp as a guillotine, but dismissed constantly. Gavin had once referred to her as the intern in front of the board, even though she had a Wharton MBA and could slice through a spreadsheet like a machete through butter. I'd noticed how she took notes during meetings, fast, with shorthand and little symbols. I'd also noticed how she'd raised her eyebrow when Gavin claimed our Q3 growth would organically exceed 30% based on strong trend lines. She was skeptical. Good, she was who I needed. My message was simple: read this before tomorrow's meeting. Page 17 and 46 are critical. You'll know what to do. I didn't sign it. The email went out at 9:12 p.m. 10 minutes later, I heard a Slack ping, then another, then silence. The next morning, I was up before the sun, still locked out of the boardroom Zoom invite. IT claimed it was above their pay grade. I wasn't angry, I was curious. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and opened Slack. The first message I saw was from an engineer in Prague. Anyone else seeing this doc floating around? And then, just as Gavin started his slide deck for the quarterly board meeting, I leaned back, opened a new tab, and watched the internal comms light up like a Christmas tree caught on fire. I didn't set out to be anyone's whistleblower. Hell, I didn't even want credit. I just wanted the truth to sit in the boardroom, even if I couldn't. 6 months ago, everything started feeling off. Subtle at first. Gavin would cancel ops meetings last minute, then turn around and present budget projections that hadn't been vetted. Numbers started appearing in investor decks that I'd never signed off on. Preliminary modeling, he'd say. Aspirational forecasts. I called it what it was: high-gloss fiction dressed up in pie charts. The acquisition pipeline, the one Gavin bragged would double our valuation, was leaking optimism like a punctured oil drum. One of the target companies had active legal issues in 2 states. Another had overlapping patents with a competitor that was known for litigious tantrums. And the crown jewel, Zipfleet, looked shiny on the surface, but any real analyst could see their user retention numbers were propped up by promotional bloat and last-minute VC patchwork. I brought it up once, just once. "Carolyn," Gavin said, smoothing his tie like it was some kind of talisman, "we're not here to dwell on roadblocks. We're here to move the needle." Right, move the needle. Even if it's toward a cliff. After that, I stopped wasting breath and started building back up. Every night after the Slack pings died down and the Keurig stopped hissing, I'd dig. I compiled call transcripts, buried footnotes in financial disclosures, quiet legal filings. It wasn't hard, just time-consuming. Gavin didn't hide things so much as assume no one would bother looking. The deeper I went, the worse it got. We were on the edge of a market correction. Last-mile logistics was becoming oversaturated. Gavin kept using phrases like bullish surge and sustained demand momentum in his pitch decks. He was gambling that no one would blink as long as the graphs went up and to the right. But I blinked, and I printed. The binder I made was black, matte, and ugly as sin. Inside, 112 pages of sourced, cross-checked, impossible-to-spin analysis. I called it Contingency Alpha, not because I was trying to sound dramatic, because it was exactly that. If this ship turned into a fireball, it was the only lifeboat with a map. I never planned to use it, but plans change. When I got Gavin's email the night before the board meeting, the one locking me out, I didn't just hit print. I hit send. I'd spent weeks deciding who, if anyone, could be trusted. Definitely not the senior partners. They'd already hitched their wagons to Gavin's vision. Most of them wouldn't know a P&L risk flag if it bit them in the stock options. But Lana Brooks? Different story. She was new enough to still care and smart enough to hide how much she already knew. She didn't blink when someone threw jargon at her. She asked real questions, then quietly asked better ones in the hallway. I'd watched her scribble notes during Gavin's last boardroom life fest, her pen halting every time he forecasted magic. So I took a shot. The email was short. Read the attached. Pages 17, 28, and 46 are essential. Internal use only. This isn't sabotage, it's protection. I debated signing it. Then I added one line at the bottom, check footnote 8. That's where he buried the liability. And I hit send. It was nearly 10 p.m. Outside my window, the streetlights flickered on like stage lights for a show no one wanted to admit was starting. I leaned back and waited. I didn't expect a reply. Honestly, I figured it would be a silent dead drop. Maybe she'd glance at it, maybe she wouldn't. At 2:13 a.m., I got her reply. Is this real? No greeting, no sign-off, just 3 words that told me she hadn't just skimmed it, she'd read it, understood it. Felt the ground tilt the same way I had. I typed back all sourced, triple-checked. You'll know where to look. No emoji, no thanks, this wasn't a friendship. This was a match handed to someone standing next to a haystack soaked in kerosene. Then, silence again. But not inside me. Because somewhere under the calm, beneath the analytical precision and long-learned patience of a woman who'd watched too many mediocre men fumble their way into power, something else was stirring. Not anger, exactly. Protective instinct. I still cared about the company, the junior staff who pulled 14-hour shifts trying to clean up after Gavin's vanity metrics, the regional leads who thought this acquisition would save them from another round of layoffs. I didn't want to be right. I just didn't want them lied to. And if I had to torch a few careers to make that happen, well, they should have let me in the damn room. The morning sunlight hit my desk like an interrogation lamp. Harsh, cold, and uninvited. I sat there, cradling my lukewarm coffee like a stress ball, refreshing my inbox more out of habit than hope. Gavin's silence was louder than any reply. No apology, no follow-up, not even a thank you for understanding. Just that one glossy email that effectively erased me from the most important meeting of the quarter. I checked the calendar again. The boardroom Zoom link wasn't there. Not in my inbox, not in Slack, not even in the general company calendar where it always showed up for execs, no matter how streamlined Gavin claimed the process was. I pinged IT, hi folks. Missing the Zoom for Q3 board. Can you resend? 3 minutes passed, then 5, then hi Carolyn. We've been instructed not to reissue credentials. Sorry, above our pay grade, that was it. No explanation, no tech jargon. Just the corporate equivalent of a shrug and an NDA. I stared at that message for a full minute, my grip tightening around the coffee cup until the cardboard sleeve creaked. My pulse thudded in my neck. I could feel it hot, rising. Rage like a static charge climbing up my spine looking for a place to arc. But I didn't yell, didn't slam anything. I just closed Slack, minimized Outlook, and opened my personal desktop folder titled Failsafes. Because war hadn't been declared yet, but I'd already passed the match. Lana. I opened our email thread again and reread her reply from the night before. Is this real? God, I'd stared at those 3 words for 10 minutes before writing back. Not because I doubted what I'd sent, but because I knew what they meant. Lana wasn't shocked, it wasn't disbelief. It was confirmation. She had already suspected. I had just ripped the curtain down. My response had been clinical, all sourced, triple-checked, you'll know where to look. That was the most I could safely say. The report spoke for itself. Pages 17 and 46 were the linchpins, financial projections with doctored baselines, and a legal flag Gavin had buried in footnote 8 of a slide no one ever looked at. Still, I had no clue what she'd do with it. I didn't know Lana personally. We weren't friends. We'd never grabbed lunch or whispered in the hallways. I only knew what I'd observed. And what I saw was a woman who'd spent her short corporate career being underestimated, ignored, and overtalked, but who listened like a hawk and never missed a beat. The kind of woman who didn't need a flame, just an excuse. By 9:02 a.m., I was still in my home office, watching the meeting start without me. I had no link, no agenda, no official weigh-in, just Slack messages trickling from the comms team and a few junior managers who didn't know I'd been ghosted. Gavin's already 2 slides in. He's presenting Zip Fleet as a done deal. Anyone seen Carolyn? That one hurt. I almost typed back. I wanted to, but no, not yet. Not while the knife was still being hidden under the white tablecloth. At 9:17 a.m., I got a direct Slack ping from one of the engineers in Seattle. Carolyn, is this your file going around? I didn't answer, because I couldn't confirm that, not directly, not yet, but I knew then. Lana hadn't just read it, she'd passed it. Someone on the inside was circulating Contingency Alpha. It had begun. I pulled up the board meeting Slack channel, normally silent, now humming like a beehive stuck in a server rack. Pings, DMs, eyes emoji, anonymous file drops. Not loud yet, but not quiet either. I imagined Gavin up there, clicking through his pretty little PowerPoint with its blue sky projections and buzzword salad. Smiling, maybe, posturing. The king of vaporware, convinced no one could smell the smoke. And somewhere in that room, or maybe on a screen just outside it, Lana was reading the same footnotes I had, asking herself the same questions. It wasn't war yet, but I had given her the match. It was only a matter of time before someone lit the fuse. 9:36 a.m. My coffee had gone cold. The mug still sat by my elbow, untouched for at least an hour, but I didn't dare move. I was sitting dead still in my office chair, eyes locked on the company's Slack like it was a live wire, because it was. Every ping, every emoji, every comment, it was voltage humming through my fingertips. I wasn't in the boardroom, but my report was, and someone, lesser audacity, was about to set it off. Gavin had kicked off the board presentation precisely at 9 o'clock, per his usual theater kid punctuality. I imagined it in my mind, him standing up there in that gray-blue suit that probably cost more than my first car, clicking through sanitized slides, smiling that perfect practice smile like he was selling beachfront property in Nebraska. Strategic vision, market dominance, leverage synergy, he loved that crap. Could string buzzwords together like Christmas lights, wrap him around his neck, and still expect applause. And according to the Slack snippets pouring in, he was hitting all the old notes. The Zip fleet acquisition was going to catapult us into next-gen freight efficiency. Q3 projections were well-positioned for exponential lift. Customer retention metrics were tracking at 96.4%. I nearly snorted my cold coffee out my nose at that one. Zipfleet didn't have 96% retention unless you counted their fake shell accounts and people who forgot to cancel free trials. But hey, Gavin's never let reality mess with a good slide deck. Then at 9:42 a.m., the first real signal cut through the noise. From an intern in investor relations. Wait, Lana just interrupted. I sat up straighter. Another ping, this time from someone in legal. She asked about source integrity on the Q3 projection. And then finally, from someone inside the room, someone senior. What's your source for projected 38% growth in Q3? Direct quote. I stared at the message for a full 5 seconds. Lana had lit the match. That line, 38% growth in Q3, was Gavin's sacred cow. The one number he'd been peddling to every board member and investor like it was divine prophecy carved on a stone tablet. That number had never passed through financial modeling, never hit ops for feasibility, never even been run through logistics for regional scalability. He plucked it from a worst-case spreadsheet, took the top percentile and slapped it on a deck like it was gospel. And now someone was asking where it came from. The Slack channel exploded. He's fumbling. He said industry averages but didn't name a firm. Lana asked again, she's pushing. He just said internal analysis. She said, I'd like to see it. I bit my lip hard. Internal analysis didn't exist, at least not in Gavin's camp. The only real analysis on Zipfleet sat in Contingency Alpha, and Lana knew that now. She didn't have to name me, she didn't have to say a word. She just had to keep asking questions that exposed the cracks. And Gavin, he wasn't ready. He was a presentation guy. Great on the first pass. Looks good, sounds good, coasts on confidence. But push just a little, ask something outside the script. He'd unravel like dollar store wrapping paper in the rain. 9:46 a.m. Slack pinged again. Lana asked about regulatory risk. She cited a DOJ probe into Zipfleet compliance in Illinois. WTF, did anyone know about that? I smiled for the first time all morning. Page 17. That was where I buried the DOJ probe, wrapped in neutral language and sourced from 3 public filings no one had bothered to look up. Gavin certainly hadn't. He was too busy pitching fantasy. Now it was out. My report wasn't just in the room, it was speaking through her. My name didn't come up, but my fingerprints were all over that air, and I didn't care if Gavin never said it aloud. I didn't care if every board member pretended they always had concerns. I just wanted the truth to hit them like a freight train. The Slack pings kept coming, faster now, like popcorn kernels in a pan. Zipfleet has exposure risk across 3 markets, Lana says. She asked if that was included in our projected liability modeling. Silence. Legal just whispered something to Gavin. He looks pale. Good, let him sweat. Because while he clicked through his pastel-colored pie charts, I had been building a landmine. And now, with a few calm questions and a well-placed PDF, Lana had stepped back and let him walk directly onto it. From my desk, locked out, muted, invisible, I leaned back, folded my hands in my lap, and waited for the next crack to echo through the building. 9:51 a.m. I wasn't in the boardroom, but I could feel it shift. Something about the Slack messages changed, not the frequency, but the tone. Less chatter, more silence. The kind of silence that hums under your skin. The kind that means someone just got caught with a match in their hand and gasoline on their shoes. Then came the ping. Why wasn't this acquisition disclosed as under active regulatory review for antitrust? Lana, there it was. Slide 17. The question I knew Gavin would never be prepared to answer. Because to answer it, he'd have to admit he hadn't done his homework, or worse, that he had and buried it. I clicked open my original Contingency Alpha file just to stare at it again. Page 17, highlighted in yellow, titled Pending Legal Exposure, Zip Fleet and Competitor Crossover Zones. The section cited FTC interest in the Midwestern region, cross-indexed with a pending complaint from the Illinois Attorney General's office. It wasn't some tinfoil theory, it was public record. You just had to look. Gavin hadn't. He never thought he'd have to. The Slack feed stalled. 2 minutes, no messages. I imagined the boardroom, Gavin standing still, blinking. Legal counsel leaning forward, just slightly, eyes narrowing. Maybe someone shifting in their leather seat. The hum of fluorescent lights above, too loud in the tension. Then one message finally landed. Legal just said we'll need to revisit that. Another one, Gavin claimed he'd seen no documentation. And then, one of the partners asked, then where did this come from? My heart was pounding, but not from panic, from something older, deeper. The slow rise of vindication crawling up my spine like a sunrise finally catching fire. Because they had it. Someone in that room had the PDF. I imagined it being slid down the table. A sleek black and white report with no cover art, no branding. Just a quiet title across the top, Contingency Alpha Market Conditions and Risk Disclosures. The Slack pinged again. Who authored this? Followed by, header says prepared by Carolyn Reeves. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. My name was in the room now. I could practically see Gavin's face, the twitch in his jaw, the forced chuckle he always used when caught off guard. His go-to line in tense moments, let's not get lost in hypotheticals, except this wasn't hypothetical. This was footnoted, time-stamped, and staring him in the face. And the best part? He couldn't deny it. He didn't know which hands had passed it. He didn't know who else had read it. Didn't even know how it got there. All he knew was that he no longer controlled the narrative. At 10:03 a.m., a message from someone in the regional office came through. Gavin stalling. Says internal documents aren't always accurate. Right on cue. When cornered, he didn't fight. He deflected. He discredited, but even that was crumbling. Another ping, board paused the deck. Counsel stepped out with 2 partners. And then, someone's pulling old audit logs. They're trying to trace when Alpha was created. I leaned back in my chair, the edges of my lips twitching. They wouldn't find anything damning. I made sure of it. The file had been created on my personal machine, time-stamped outside of office hours with every source linked to public disclosures. No stolen documents, no internal leaks, just truth, collected by someone who gave a damn when no one else did. The next message sent a chill down my arms. Chair just said, we'll return to this after a short break. They weren't brushing it off. They were digging in. Gavin's worst nightmare wasn't that I made a mistake, it was that I hadn't. That everything I'd warned about was real and traceable, and about to be on the minutes of a board meeting he tried to lock me out of. I imagined him standing alone at the front of the room, the projector glowing behind him. His presentation paused on some optimistic chart about synergistic vertical integrations. Completely irrelevant now, because no one was looking at his slides. They were looking at mine. 10:17 a.m. The silence in the Slack channel was deafening now, not because there were no messages, but because the messages that did come through were short, sparse, coded. Chair just stepped into the hallway. Baird left with him. Took the PDF. Lana's not at her seat anymore. Each ping hit like a muffled footfall outside a locked door. I could feel the boardroom unraveling, not with shouting, but with something worse, whispers. They weren't ignoring Contingency Alpha anymore. They were passing it, printing it, reading it, in hushed conversations behind closed doors, away from Gavin's reach. And that's when the panic would really start. Not when you're openly challenged, but when the people who smiled at you 10 minutes ago won't meet your eye anymore. It's when a CEO knows he's bleeding. At 10:21, Lana came back. I imagined her walking in, calm, collected, heels clicking like punctuation. Her face unreadable, no smirk, no smugness, just surgical precision behind the eyes. She sat down, adjusted her chair, picked up her pen, and said one sentence. Some data has come to light that suggests the current strategy may be unsound. No drama, no theatrics, just an execution in business casual. The Slack feed lit up again. Gavin looks like he swallowed his tongue. He just said, let's remember this is just one interpretation. Now he's talking about contextual factors and aspirational modeling. Translation, backpedal mode. Then came the pivot I'd been waiting for. Gavin cleared his throat and dropped the line I'd predicted hours ago. It seems this analysis came from a rogue internal consultant. Not Carolyn Reeves, head of strategic risk. Not the woman who'd spent years building the very forecasting models he now bastardized. No, not me, just a rogue internal consultant. I laughed, a bitter little huff that startled even me. That was his game. Strip the title, strip the credibility. If he didn't say my name, maybe the analysis would lose weight. But Gavin's problem wasn't my title. It was my accuracy. And Alpha didn't read like a vendetta. Read like a weather report predicting the storm you were already drenched in. The next message hit harder than the rest. Board member asked, "Who prepared Alpha? Not what is this? Not where did this come from? Who?" That meant it wasn't a rumor anymore, it was evidence. And they wanted the name behind it. Another message, Gavin said it wasn't board vetted and shouldn't be taken as strategic direction. Then, legal just quietly said, it's footnoted and time-stamped. That part wasn't surprising. I'd known if it reached council, they'd do what council always does, verify and cover their asses. And a report with public source documentation, time-stamped on personal time outside the firewall, untouchable, and still crawling up Gavin's throat like a fist. 10:28 a.m. Another board member stepped into the hallway, then another. No one was making eye contact with Gavin now, not even Lana. And I'd bet anything he was starting to sweat. The kind that doesn't show in the armpits, but beads at the back of the neck and runs down your spine like ice melt. Because it wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about trust. And the trust wasn't in his forecast. It was in mine. At 10:32 a.m., a new message popped into Slack, short and sharp. Chair just asked to reconvene with legal present. I leaned forward in my chair, heart thudding. Gavin had tried to erase me from that boardroom with one email. Now my name was being spoken by people he couldn't silence, attached to a document he couldn't discredit, surrounded by questions he couldn't answer. I wasn't in the room, but I was everywhere inside it. 10:47 a.m. The boardroom doors had stopped swinging. No more hallway consults, no more whispered alliances. Everyone was back in their seats, but nothing felt reset. Could almost feel the static in the carpet, the hush before a thunderclap. And Gavin, bless him, was still clinging to his podium like it could somehow anchor him to relevance. Then he said it, or rather he tried to say something. "Let's not give undue weight to unauthorized material," he mumbled, voice paper thin, eyes scanning for lifeline. It was not formally cleared for executive review. Unauthorized material. Like it was a rogue blog post, or a stray intern's term paper, but the damage was done. His own counsel didn't move, didn't blink, just slowly turned a page and cleared his throat. I wasn't there, but I knew how it landed. I knew the weight of the moment by the way Slack fell silent, completely, unnervingly still for a full 2 minutes. And then came the message. GC just read the document footer aloud. Prepared by Carolyn Reeves, Head of Strategic Risk Analysis. That was it. No embellishment, no hedging. Just the title Gavin tried to bury, standing naked at the bottom of every page he'd hoped no one would ever read. I could see it in my mind like a movie. The logo-less PDF glowing on the boardroom monitor. The last slide frozen mid-animation behind Gavin, completely irrelevant now. And the footer, small and neat at the bottom of every page, had finally spoken louder than any voice in the room. Prepared by Carolyn Reeves. I ghost walked in before I did. Not as a warning, not even as vengeance. As a reminder, because I had spent a decade building frameworks, not friendships. I didn't charm the board, didn't take golf trips, didn't play the politics. I brought receipts, quietly, reliably, and when they ignored those receipts, I kept them anyway, filed, time-stamped, risk-rated, because I wasn't there to be liked. I was there to protect the damn company. Now the board knew whose hands had really been on the wheel. Slack trickled back to life in short, fragmented bursts. You could hear a pin drop in there. Even Baird didn't say anything. That man always has something to say. Gavin keeps fiddling with his pen. It's annoying. I imagined him doing that thing he always did when cornered, spinning a pen between his fingers like he was working out an equation, like distraction made him look intelligent. But the room had moved on. He was no longer the subject of interest. I was. Another ping, Lana just said. The report contains public data, legal sourcing, and internal inconsistencies. I believe it warrants formal review. Chair nodded. No pushback. Someone asked if Carolyn's been contacted. They were saying my name now, not in hushed tones, not in sidebars, out loud. I was still locked out of the Zoom, still sitting in my home office with a dying houseplant and 2 unopened yogurt cups from the fridge. But I was everywhere in that room. My words were on the table. My risk matrix was under review. My judgment, dismissed for months, was now guiding theirs. And Gavin was shrinking, not collapsing. That would require noise. He was shrinking, word by word, fact by fact, slowly disappearing under the weight of what he refused to read, what he tried to hide, what he'd buried because it came from a woman who didn't flatter him. My professionalism had walked in louder than a lawsuit, and I wasn't done yet. 11:12 a.m. I was feeding my cat when the call came in. She'd been meowing at the fridge like I kept secrets in there, not half a bag of spinach and 2 sad eggs. I bent down to scoop kibble into her bowl just as my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in weeks. Blocked caller ID. Direct line. Kind of call that didn't come from someone trying to reschedule a dentist appointment. I stared at it, let it ring twice. Then I answered, "This is Carolyn." The voice on the other end was smooth, measured, and familiar in the way a scalpel is, rarely used, but unforgettable once it cuts. "Carolyn, it's Richard Sloan. I'm calling as chair of the board. Not Gavin, not HR. Not the brittle assistant who always called from the office of. The chair himself, no buffer, no middleman. Just a straight line from the top. We'd like you to join us this afternoon," he said, as if it were the most normal request in the world. "There have been developments. Measured satisfaction doesn't come from shouting. It doesn't come from throwing things or tweeting revenge. It comes from scooping kibble while a man who once nodded through your dismissal now realizes he needs you more than oxygen. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, "What time?" 3 o'clock. Conference room B. Please bring your materials. Understood. And that was it. No apology, no groveling. Just the corporate white flag, neatly folded, hand-delivered, and still warm from panic. I went back to my computer and checked Slack. The message feed looked like it had been hit by a digital hurricane. Farway's lead partner just stood up and said, "I suggest we postpone the vote until Miss Reeves can be present." Gavin tried to interject but was cut off by counsel. Vote to pause passed unanimously. Unanimously, let that sink in. The same board that once nodded along to Gavin's every slide had just silenced him with a single motion. Not because they believed in me, but because they finally understood I had something they couldn't afford to ignore: clarity. And clarity doesn't ask for permission. It walks in, lays the numbers on the table, and dares you to blink. More messages followed, but I barely read them. My mind was already on 3 p.m. I pulled out my copy of Contingency Alpha, the original binder with the hand-labeled tabs and sticky notes that had lived under my desk for months. It was wrinkled from use, marked with revisions. Lived in, real, just like the truth it carried. I didn't need to edit it. I didn't need to rebrand it. All I needed to do was show up. Gavin had bet everything on optics. He built his house on charisma, on handshakes, on buzzwords that looked good in quarterly summaries but collapsed under scrutiny. And when scrutiny finally arrived, in the form of a junior analyst, a PDF, and a boardroom fed up with fairy tales, he had nothing left but deflection. I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. I wanted the people who rolled their eyes when I raised flags to sit in their ergonomic chairs and read the damn footnotes. So I printed a fresh copy of the report, slid it into a new binder, this one crisp, clean, black as sin. Then I opened a blank slide deck and typed 4 words onto the first slide: rebuild, not collapse. My pulse was steady, my expression calm, my presence, not just requested, required. Because I wasn't just coming back to the table. I was bringing the blueprint for saving the company they almost let him burn to the ground. 3 o'clock p.m. sharp. I walked into the boardroom with the same steps I used to take every Monday morning for 8 years, except this time, no one looked through me. No polite nods, no distracted scrolling. They watched me enter like the meeting had only just started. Gavin was already seated at the head of the table. His suit looked like it had been steamed in panic. The circle under his right eye was darker than the polish on his loafers. He didn't stand, didn't offer a handshake. I didn't expect one. I didn't greet him. I didn't greet anyone. I walked to the screen at the far end of the room, set down my laptop, plugged in the HDMI, and waited half a second for the display to flicker to life. First slide, 4 words: rebuild, not collapse. No title card, no logo, no Gavin-approved branding. Just a white slide, bold black text, and silence. I turned to the room, met no one's eyes, and said, "Let's start with what you weren't told." No icebreaker, no preamble. I clicked to slide 2. Behind me, I heard Gavin shift in his chair, the familiar clearing of his throat. The warm-up noise he always made when he was about to spin something into gold-painted nonsense. "This really isn't the proper," he started, but someone beat him to it. "I think you've said enough, Gavin." The voice was calm, clipped, and final. It came from Baird, Farway Capital's stone-faced partner, the same man who once asked me if I could translate ops talk into boardroom English. Gavin fell silent. That was the only interruption I got. For the next 27 minutes, I walked them through the report I'd bled over, slide by slide. I showed the regulatory risk timelines Gavin buried. I walked through the cash burn forecast from Zip Fleet's last quarter, the one Gavin called noisy data. It demonstrated how projected Q3 growth was not only inflated, but based on duplicated client activity from a promo cycle Gavin knew about and deliberately omitted. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't glance at him. I didn't need to. The numbers did the shouting for me. By slide 11, the chair stopped taking notes and started staring. By slide 15, legal counsel was highlighting sections in the printed copy like it was a criminal deposition. By slide 17, yes, that slide, no one looked away. And Gavin, he sat stone still. No more pen spinning. No more forced smiles. Just a man watching his kingdom dissolve into PowerPoint slides he didn't understand, presented by the woman he thought he could write out of the story. I ended on a final slide. Blank, just the footer. Prepared by Carolyn Reeves, head of strategic risk analysis. No taglines, no applause bait, just identity. Reclaimed and undeniable. "I'll take questions," I said. None came. For a moment, no one moved. Then Richard, the chair, leaned forward and said, "We'll need to convene privately regarding next steps. Miss Reeves, I'd ask that you remain available for follow-up." I nodded, of course. And then I closed my laptop, slid it into my bag, and walked out the door I'd once been locked out of without looking back. I didn't need to. Behind me, the walls were already shifting. You tried to erase me with an email. I rewrote the meeting instead. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the Coffee Pot strikes again.